2021 off-year elections didn't leave Democrats feeling very happy. But were the elections a rejection of woke politics? And are we seeing the birth of a new kind of politician? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Make sure to like this episode and subscribe to our channel. And even if you are subscribed, just double check, because YouTube has been secretly unsubscribing people. And it also isn't letting people know when new videos are out, so be sure to check back every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday for new episodes. But if you've been watching the best American news show of all time, then you're already aware of some of the results from last Tuesday's election. For example, Republican Glenn Youngkin won the race for governor of Virginia. Republican Winsome Sears became the first black woman to win the race for lieutenant governor of Virginia. Republican Jason Miyares became the first Latino elected as attorney general in Virginia. Republicans took the House of Delegates in Virginia as well. But it wasn't a total defeat for Democrats. Democrat Terry McAuliffe may have lost the governorship, but he did win the Never Photographed in Blackface Award, unlike Virginia's current Democratic governor. Outside Virginia, though, there were some other noteworthy results. In New York, the incumbent Democratic mayor of Buffalo declared victory over his Democratic socialist rival, who initially beat him in the primary last spring. And he did it with a write-in campaign. And in Minnesota, Minneapolis voters rejected a measure to defund the police. Even the Democratic win in New Jersey wasn't seen as much of a win. You may have also heard from your favorite news anchor / comedian that education was the top issue in Virginia's governor race, and that Glenn Youngkin's opponent, Democrat Terry McAuliffe, kind of shot himself in the foot on education when he said he doesn't believe parents should tell schools what to teach. It may seem a bit too early to start saying what all this means for the 2022 midterm elections, unless you're the mainstream media, which is encouraging Democrats to start panicking. It's never too early to panic, which is why I live in a bunker 28 floors beneath the Empire State Building. You'll never get me there, climate change. CNN argues Democrats lost because they misjudged the nation's mood, which is why we need to get all Americans to wear mood rings. Are the 2021 off-year election results a sign that American people have had it with wokeness? Some people certainly think so, including conservative commentator Candace Owens, who says that America is tired of woke, and American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Schlapp, who calls the Youngkin win a woke lash, and Fox Business host Larry Kudlow, who calls the Virginia election a total rejection of wokeness and critical race theory. But is it? Because all of those people are conservatives, so of course they think it's a woke lash. Asking conservatives whether Americans hate wokeism is like asking McDonald's whether Americans hate salad. Obviously the answer is yes. So what role did so-called wokeism or critical race theory play in the Virginia elections? And do the results in New York, Minnesota, and New Jersey also signal a rejection of the far left? Let's start by taking a look at the Virginia elections. Right after the break. Welcome back. Many on the right see the 2021 election results as a rejection of wokeism. But are they? Well, let's start with Virginia. People on both sides seem to agree that critical race theory, or CRT, played a prominent role in Glenn Youngkin's win. As early as May, he appeared on Fox News as the candidate who was standing up to woke indoctrination in schools.
Well, Ben, what we're seeing right here, right now in Loudoun County is the liberal left waging a cultural war, and the victims are our children. And who's standing up for them? Not the politicians, but in fact, parents and teachers. And who's going to stand up for the parents and teachers right now where the school board isn't and politicians aren't either? And as governor, I will stand for excellence in education. We will not teach critical race theory.
Much later, on September 1st, he announced that as governor of Virginia, he would ban the teaching of CRT in Virginia on day one. And in October, he noted that education was the #1 issue for Virginia voters, saying that parents are absolutely angry about school shutdowns and CRT in the classroom. Lieutenant Governor-elect Winsome Sears, meanwhile, called critical race theory nonsense on Fox News. And Attorney General-elect Jason Miyares said in August that rather than unite us, CRT is an extreme left-wing perspective that teaches children to learn to hate their country. So all three of the Republican candidates who won in Virginia had taken an explicit stance against critical race theory in public education. And Virginia voters were definitely thinking about education. A Washington Post poll showed that between September and October, education had vaulted to the #1 issue for Virginia voters. Remember, Virginia has been a hot spot for school controversies, especially in wealthy suburbs like Loudoun County and Fairfax County. The same poll showed that education voters favored Democrat Terry McAuliffe by 33 points in September, but favored Republican Youngkin by 9 points in October. Anti-CRT activist Christopher Rufo was quick to argue that Youngkin's focus on CRT was the reason that education had become so important for Virginia voters, and the reason they switched sides. Polls have shown that most Americans don't support at least some of the concepts taught in CRT. 54% of participants in a Manhattan Institute poll in September supported removing lessons based on critical race theory, about concepts such as white privilege and systemic racism from public school curriculum. Meanwhile, in October, a Harvard Capps-Harris poll asked, "Do you think the schools should promote the idea that people are victims and oppressors based on their race, or should they teach children to ignore race in all decisions, to judge people by their character?" 63% supported ignoring race in all decisions and judging people by their character. Rufo went on to call Youngkin's win a political sea change, in which a strong majority of Virginia voters, including Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, reject the toxic politics of critical race theory. The Conservative Heritage Foundation also argues that the Virginia election proves that Americans reject critical race theory. But again, of course, McDonald's thinks that Americans are rejecting salads. So what do progressives think? Well, left-leaning sources also agree that CRT played an important role in Youngkin's win. They just didn't think that was a good thing. We'll take a look at their views after the break. Welcome back. The right and the left actually agreed on something. CRT was important in the Virginia election. The left just doesn't like that. Slate and The Guardian both attributed the Virginia results to white backlash against critical race theory, which they argue Republicans misrepresent. And then there are these guests on MSNBC.
There's no doubt that critical race theory is a weapon that he utilized to great effect.
Even more so than Youngkin versus Terry McAuliffe. I think Trumpism and critical race theory is on the ballot. And what you're seeing, whether Terry, and still a lot of votes out, but whether or not Terry makes this up or not, I think tonight is a victory for critical race theory. Because if you look at McAuliffe, and again, it's still early, it's not a lot of votes out, but if you look at McAuliffe's margins, so they're way off of what Biden's margins are.
So CRT was important for Youngkin, but in a bad way. And then there were the arguments that Youngkin's focus on stopping CRT was racist.
Well, Trump approved Republican Glenn Youngkin's closing message to Virginia voters has almost singularly focused on weaponizing race, stoking hysteria over the coded boogeyman of critical race theory.
But what he's done is he's laundered Trump's really sort of disgusting, flagrant out-racism. He's wrapped it in education, and he's given it a lie as a label. And they said he's going to ban it. There isn't any critical race there.
This more palatable Republican who still uses the same racist themes that Trump did, he just packaged them in a soccer dad sweater vest model.
This is about the fact that a good chunk of voters out there are okay with white supremacy.
The problem is here, they want white supremacy by ventriloquist effect. There is a black mouth moving, but a white idea through the running on the runway of the tongue of a figure who justifies and legitimates the white supremacist practices.
Asking progressives whether Americans love racism is like asking Starbucks whether Americans love pumpkin spice lattes. But the point is, everyone agrees that critical race theory was on the ballot in Virginia, except Vox, which argues that the results have more to do with Biden's unpopularity, and Youngkin's top strategists, who argue that it's just as much about parental rights. On top of that, McAuliffe's statement about parents in the classroom gave the Youngkin campaign a huge gift. As Youngkin's campaign strategist put it, Terry McAuliffe said it better than we ever could have. He wanted to restrict the parents' involvement in their children's education. McAuliffe really should have known better. If we've learned anything as a species, it's do not tell parents what to do with their own kids. Even if you see a child about to stick a knife into an electrical outlet right in front of their parents, say nothing. This is how the mommy wars start. Still, it's hard to ignore the role that critical race theory played in the Virginia elections, given that all three Republican candidates outright rejected critical race theory and won. But what about Buffalo, Minneapolis, and New Jersey? Are they rejections of wokeism too? Well, it might depend on how you define wokeism, but if wokeism is broadly the same thing as far-left policies, then, well, yeah. India Walton was poised to become the first openly socialist mayor of a major U.S. city. In fact, after winning the Democratic primary, Walton was literally the only name on the ballot in Buffalo. Republicans don't even bother to run anymore, because Buffalo hasn't had a Republican mayor in more than 50 years. The last time Buffalo went Republican, people were complaining about these British guys with funny haircuts. So India Walton, a Democratic socialist, was going to win the general election. But then, the current mayor of Buffalo, Democrat Byron Brown, ran a write-in campaign and won. Of course, Brown has a huge amount of name recognition. But in his general election campaign, Brown emphasized moderate positions, like being against defunding the police, which is why he said his re-election is a rebuke of socialism. Meanwhile, in Minneapolis, where George Floyd was killed, and where the abolish the police movement looked the strongest, there was a ballot measure that would have actually abolished the police. But voters rejected it. And in New Jersey, some journalists see the unexpectedly close race as a problem caused by woke Democrats. But will what happened in 2021 carry over to the 2022 midterm elections? And while The Guardian called these election results Trumpism without Trump in a bad, racist dog whistle way, others were more appreciative of the idea this might be a path for a post-Trump Republican Party. What does Trumpism without Trump look like? Well, apparently it looks like Glenn Youngkin, a strong stance against CRT and against extended lockdowns, with a dash of populism in his stances on grocery taxes and teacher pay. His ties with Trump were a turnoff for some Republicans, but he didn't play them up. And even CNN saw how McAuliffe's attempts to marry Youngkin to Trump backfired because voters didn't buy it. And if CNN says you're talking too much about Trump, you know you have a problem. According to some journalists and Youngkin strategists, Youngkin appealed to Virginia voters by sticking to issues that affected them in their daily lives, local issues rather than broad national politics. Instead of focusing on the national debate over education, Youngkin talked about how it affected Virginia families directly, while McAuliffe campaigned with President Biden, Vice President Harris, and former President Obama, and focused on big-picture Democratic Party issues like abortion and climate change. It turned out, in a state where 33% of voters identify as independents, staying focused on issues that personally affected voters worked, while the threat of impending doom represented by Trumpism didn't work. As one journalist put it, McAuliffe ran a campaign based on Virginians' greatest fears. Youngkin ran on their hopes for pragmatic governance. Hope won in Virginia. So what do you think? Did hope win? Or was it just white supremacy? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, America Uncovered is mainly supported by viewers like you. So head on over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/America Uncovered. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.